Hello everyone, and welcome to Ibi Speaks. My name is Ibinabo Enebi, and welcome to the last installment of the Jesus Talk series, a series that would help strengthen your faith in Jesus Christ and help to bring Jesus Christ out of the pages of the Bible. And I hope that after my conversation with my special guest today, that you would go from doubt to faith in Jesus Christ, and that you would move from a subjective suggestion about the existence of Jesus Christ to a more concrete form of faith that Jesus Christ actually does exist. And today's topic is titled From Despair to Great Hope. And to do justice to this topic are two special guests, Nnenna Okonkwo and Ziri Defranchi.
Hello.
Yeah, so let me just give a brief introduction of both of you. So Nnenna is an IT engineer and an entrepreneur. She also works with mental health patients, teaching them new skills to help them go back into work. And she is joining us all the way from the United Kingdom. Welcome, Nnenna. And my second guest is Ziri Defranchi. He is an inspirational author, an eclectic poet, the author of the philosophical nonfiction Life and Mystery Solved, widely acclaimed as a masterpiece by readers. He has several books under his belt, including Manna, Food for the Soul, Wilderness, Fruits, a collection of eclectic poems, and is joining us also from the United Kingdom. Yeah! So briefly, I'd like to welcome all my viewers, my subscribers, and everyone who's watching me. I am highly appreciative that you're here. I'm very grateful. And if you're a first-time viewer and you haven't subscribed to my YouTube channel, please subscribe. It's Ibinabo Enebi. So welcome, guys, to Ibi Speaks.
Thank you
very much.
Listen, I'm very happy that you're doing this today. I'm very super excited about it. And thank you so much for taking time out of your very busy schedule to be part of the conversation. So, Nnenna, I want to start from you or start with you. So I was reading through your bio, and this is what it read. It said that several years ago, you experienced workplace bullying.
Yeah.
And so things went out or spiraled out of control, and you became homeless in the process for about a year plus. Now, Nnenna, would you mind taking us through that process?
Thank you for having me. So a few years ago, I used to work in IT. I was one of very few women in the organization that was working in IT. I enjoyed the job very much, but I found it very, very stressful. So a few years into the job, I started being bullied by my manager and various other people. A lot of shouting, a lot of dissatisfied people for whatever reason it was. And after quite a while, I fell ill, very, very ill. And I didn't realize how ill I was until I stopped working. So I was off work for quite some time and recovered and went back to work, but the bullying continued. Rather than my employers deal with the problem, because I had put in a grievance, for instance, but it wasn't attended to. So rather than my employers deal with the problem, the nemesis, so to speak, they had me sign an agreement and paid me to leave the job. So that was how I lost the job. And obviously my job was paying for my bills and everything. So after about a year, I couldn't maintain my car, my place anymore, and lost it. And I became homeless. That was how I became homeless. While I was homeless, I was actually living in temporary accommodation and in a hostel, which was absolutely awful. And in fact, before that happened, while I was in my old flat, my old place, I remember feeling very, very scared and very worried, not knowing what was going to happen, where I was going to go, because I felt quite let down by a lot of people as well at the time. And I just heard this voice saying to me, I've got you, just like that, I've got you. I didn't know where it was coming from, but looking back, I realized that it was it was from high above, it was God speaking to me, saying not to worry, everything's going to be okay. And that was how I had the courage to phone a friend I hadn't spoken to for quite some time, who was quite religious. And she spoke to another friend, and they prayed for me. And that was how I was able to get into temporary accommodation. So luckily, I wasn't on the streets. I almost was, but luckily I was on the streets. I was in this temporary accommodation, which, like I said before, was absolutely awful. So, yeah.
I mean, thank God that you weren't on the streets, but what was it like for you at the time when you experienced the bullying? To what degree, or what was the magnitude of the bullying?
It was dreadful, because I used to dread going to work every day. I had good clients, good customers who liked me, liked my work, and trusted me. Yes, it was a university, and very, shall I say, middle class, so to speak, and it was very sexist, very racist. Not very many women working there, at least at the time when I was there. So I'd have a lot of people, customers, just yelling for whatever they wanted. And for instance, we'd have policies and procedures in place to help with security, because everything around IT is very secure, a lot of security in place. But they wouldn't want to comply with these security measures that were put in place to actually protect them and protect their information. So I had a lot of responsibility, but I didn't have the position to go with the responsibility that my job entailed. There was a particular bully in particular when I changed departments, who would tell lies about me to my manager and to other colleagues, and would take my work away from me and make it like it was his own work. I would get a lot of recognition for work that I had done. He would, make it like it was his work. So this went on for a few years. And in fact, I mean, anyone would ask me, why didn't I leave? So I started studying a master's in cybersecurity, which started off very well, but then I fell ill and couldn't continue with it. And at the time, I felt I lost quite a lot. I lost quite a lot with my education, with my career, my work, and yeah, it was quite uncomfortable as well, because I wasn't used to bullying. I had never heard of bullying. My parents never, bullied us, not when I was in school either. So it was quite strange being an adult dealing with that kind of thing.
Yeah, so you were talking about the bullying and all of that. Nnenna, listen, I'm so sorry to hear about it, that even nothing was done about it to protect you. It's so sad. But anyways, thank God that you are in a much better place. And Ziri, I want to come back to you, or rather, I want to come to you now. And before I just ask you any questions, I just want to read one of your poems. It's called The Fiery Trial. I find it to be very interesting, and I want to read it because I feel that it has a lot to say. So it says here, if a man dies, shall he live again? All the days of my appointed time will I wait till my change come. I am here for a purpose. I am here based on a plan. I am here for a predetermined end. I am here to play out a script. It is written. This purpose requires my purging. This plan requires my pruning. This end is prededicated. It's prededicated on my endurance. This script has struggles, but ends well. It is written. The purging and pruning are integral to the plan, purpose, and end. So I wait patiently through it all, silently seeking God till my change comes. It is written. Ziri, I see some powerful words here: purging, pruning, struggles, endurance, and all of that. So reading this poem, I sense that you two must have gone through your own fiery wilderness experience as well.
Absolutely, absolutely. Um, Nnenna is sad, yes. You had to go through what you went through. This particular poem that you've chosen, Ibi, is one of my biographical ones. In other words, written based on my own true life experiences. And it is, I mean, the recurring sentence there is that it is written, you see. Some of the things that we go through in life are appointed, we have to just pass through them. I've had my own struggles, challenges, I'll say right from birth, to be honest, but I won't go as far back as that. I would like to concentrate more on the journey that led to my calling into writing, I would say. This was around 2013, it started, 2012. A job I was doing then, the contract came to an end. And so like IBF, I faced the risk. I mean, like Nnenna, rather, I faced the risk also of, what's going to happen to me. I could be homeless because, I mean, how am I going to cope with bills if, I'm not able to meet with my expenses? But then God had already spoken to me anyway, though I didn't know the full plan at the time. And in obedience to Him, I began to live day by day, trusting Him. And that wasn't quite easy at all. When I answered the call to write, it meant that I had to more or less terminate my previous career, just like that, and focus on writing because this was a full-time experience for me. And that came with a lot of challenges. The first and foremost part is that I had to go through some transformation myself, which actually birthed the book Life a Mystery Solved, because the mindset I had, up until this time, I think I would say it was not only earthly, but it's the common one, and I couldn't have gone into this journey. I couldn't have progressed into the journey if I was still overburdened with those mindsets. And my pruning, my purging, of course, it came, it wasn't easy to say the least. It wasn't easy. And as a result, also, I needed to be transformed, I was saying, because I couldn't have, carried on with the way things had been, as you would say, business as usual. So I needed to be transformed. And it was that transformation process that actually was quite difficult. For instance, having to live on a daily basis by faith in God alone, not actually knowing how things are going to pan out, not knowing where God is taking me, not having a clear blueprint, so to speak. I had to rely on divine direction. And this became my recurring prayer. And when I speak to people and I say, oh, I am waiting on God or I am relying on God to guide or to direct me, they used to think like, this guy, is he all right? As if, couldn't you just make a decision and just run with it? But I had come at that point to realize that this area I am moving into would not actually, my human intelligence, would not suffice because I don't actually know the way ahead. God alone knew. God alone knows, and He is the one leading. So He reveals bit by bit. At the time I had to start writing, actually, God spoke to me. Just like Nnenna had a voice to say, "I've got you." I remember clearly I was reading the book, A Long Walk to Freedom, Nelson Mandela. It was on a Thursday, May. It was, yeah, because shortly after that we had the bank holiday. And on the couch, I was reading this book, had a few pages to get to the end of it. The voice spoke clearly to me and said, after reading this book, start writing your own, And I could say that was the point I knew what I had to do. But in order to do that, it wasn't easy at all. I would say that I lost probably everything. I lost everything that were, humanly speaking, material possession. I lost most of what I had accumulated up until this period. I now realize that God was trying to prune me, more or less take away everything that I had my confidence in. In the past, you look at your bank account and you say, oh yeah, life is good. You look at stuff, you look at your acquisition, your possession, and even your status, and you feel confident, But when God started stripping these things bit by bit, It was painful, humiliating, even, But you know what? The irony is that I only got to realize, who I am, really.
We're going to get to that part of the conversation. But I want to ask you something, because you said something that that kind of like that set me thinking. National institution, you work firm as well. Something you had to also have some kind of a mindset shift as well, because if you didn't have those mindset shifts, then it would have been difficult for you to even cope.
Yeah, I have to say that we lost some part of what you said, Ibi. I think you were frozen. Yeah, I only got the last bit. So do you mind paraphrasing your question in summary?
Because I said that I'm very much interested in the mindset, the change of the mindset that you were talking about. Because for example, I know, for example, that you lived in Nigeria for a long time. You had an accounting background, you had a banking and finance background and all of that. And then you had to move to the United Kingdom as well. So that when you live in Nigeria for a long time and you come to the United Kingdom, there's also some kind of a shock, and that you also need to have a mindset shift. So what was those mindset shifts that you had to have?
Okay, yeah. In all honesty, really, the actual change, the major ones actually started from 2013, thereabout. But moving into UK from Nigeria, people ask me, cultural shock and all that, but it wasn't really much. I think, back home we are aware of life abroad, so I can't, knew what to expect, as it were. So the bit that had to change, I would say, just the African way of life, always being in a hurry. Maybe you want to wait for public transportation, and then you're rushing, the queue culture here and all that. Gradually, yes, that began to change. But the bigger ones for me, but then again, it's almost when it comes to what I call the rat race mentality, in other words, the 9-to-5 lifestyle. I say like the hamster in the wheel, we're busy running around doing, all the needful, but we're not really making any real progress. So it's the same here. It's even almost even more here, in the morning, boom, everybody's out. So you can actually live here, have a wife and not even maybe see your wife if you guys are doing a morning and night and shifts. So that bit is kind of common, it's global. But the real mindset shift that began to happen had to do with my relationship and dependence on God, you see, whereby I didn't have to rely on my bank account for my daily living.
So, Nnenna, now, at the time when you were going through all of these, what was going on through your mind? What gave you that strength to go through those circumstances at the time?
Well, there were times I just didn't have the strength, believe me. But I think naturally I'm quite a resilient person. And there's this thing inside me that just refuses to give up, and I always push through. But there were times definitely when, like when I was really scared and didn't know what was going to happen, and I felt so alone. Sometimes I wanted to give up as well, just thinking there was just no way out of the situation I was in. So I suppose to answer your question, there is that fire in me, it just never goes out. There's some sort of strength and resilience that's just deep down. There's a question of digging deep to find it, when there just seems to be no hope, But yeah.
Fantastic. Ziri, you talked about, mindset shit, so I don't want to go back there. But then what kept you going at the time when you were stripped bare of everything you had?
Well, the same 4-letter word, HOPE, hope. I during this period, I dawned on a new realization. There's this normal saying that where there is life, there is hope.
Oh, yeah.
But then it dawned on me. I say that the last thing to expire in a person is hope.
I need
We
to
don't
write that
die.
down. Ziri, I need to write that down. The last thing to expire in a person is hope.
Yep.
Let me write it down.
Okay. Yeah. So we don't die when we stop breathing per se. We die when we give up hope. When hope leaves, then we're gone. And hope has to be founded. In my case, I knew because God has spoken to me. One, God never fails. God is able. God is in control. There is nothing that is difficult for him. So if he says, for instance, proverbially speaking, that he's taking me from Egypt, the land of bondage, to Canaan land, the land of promise, it doesn't matter the wilderness in between. My hope is in God to see me through. So I stopped at the time. I learned to stop listening to my own self. Another thing I realized through my journey is that the biggest enemy we have is within. And I mean within us. I run. When I set out to run, my mind begins to fight me. My mind begins to make me feel as though you can't do it today. Come on, 5 miles. You haven't even done 1 mile. See, So it's not a human being. It's not another person now trying to discourage me. But this is myself from within. So I used to wonder, where is this being that is against me? When it should actually be encouraging me, urging me on, yeah, go on, you can do it, or what? So we have that enemy within. So we need to defeat self, so to speak. So I stopped listening to myself, because discouraging words could come from within, and I started holding on to what God had told me. That is what kept me going. So hope in God, and knowing that hope in God would necessarily, as a matter of fact, it will necessarily yield the end result. So I decided to, well, I won't say I decided to, but did I have an option? I'm not sure I had an option, but at the point yet, I chose to choose God. And my hope in him kept me going.
And another thing that has come to my mind, because I've heard people say, and God said to me, and God said to me. And somebody would be listening and say, does God really speak? And how do I know that God actually spoke to me?
Yeah. Yeah. Does God speak? We already know that God speaks.
God
In
speaks, yes.
the beginning, he said,
Ziri, I'm asking you.
Yeah, I'm trying to respond. Sorry, I think the internet connection is affecting us. I think, does God speak? Yes, we all know that God speaks. That's how we came about. And God also speaks to us. Remember, I said a while ago that when I go running, myself will be speaking to me, to discourage me. Truly, there are many times we can actually speak to ourselves. But when God speaks, just like Nnenna observed, you would know that this is not coming from you. You would know that this is not a thought that is coming from within you. You would know also, if you have a relationship with God, he speaks, of course, from without, but within, if that makes sense. You see, also in my own case, I'll speak for myself. I would say that
from without, but from within. Okay. Is it like random thoughts?
Not at all. Not at all. Random thought to be yourself, maybe your mind kind of going crazy and whatever. When God speaks purposefully, and God addresses a particular situation. For instance, in Nnenna's case, she had fear and anxiety was creeping in. God said, I've got you. God addresses a situation. In my case, for instance, before I started writing, God spoke to me. He said, I'm quoting, after reading this book, start writing your own. I wasn't thinking of writing a book, not at all. What for? I was only then even writing stuff, I was sharing on social media, but I wasn't, thinking of writing a book. After reading this, start writing your own. So God speaks. But with time also, if you have a relationship with God, you would know when he speaks to you. I know when even the enemy tries to mimic God and say some things to me, you see, but then it's become easy for me to distinguish between God speaking and the enemy is subtle. He must speak, as though in the way God will speak to me. But One thing I noticed is that the enemy is very forceful, very aggressive. He keeps repeating himself. And once something is being repeated, I delete it. I know that's not, God does not repeat himself. He speaks emphatically. He speaks, it could be gentle, he just speaks, and that's it. You have a knowing in you that God has spoken, you see, and it is different to your thoughts, playing trick on you, or the enemy trying to, counterfeit God and say to you, do this, like maybe jump, or can't kill yourself, or whatever. Again, whatever God says to us is going to be positive, and it's going to be, it's something that would relate to the journey we are on. Like in the case of Nnenna, I said, I've got you. It's not going to be random, just something that doesn't make any sense. In my case, I was to go into writing, even though I didn't know it at the time. He said, after reading this book, start writing your own. So it's going to be instructive, it's going to be positive, it's going to be constructive, but it's not forceful. It's not forceful. Once it's forceful, I know this is the enemy, because sometimes it happens to me, something comes in, it keeps going. I say, okay, that's it. I'm not even going to bother with that anymore. So yes, God speaks. And sorry to say, some people, they find it difficult. God speak. I know many people have abused, God told me. Yeah. When they have just invented a thought, they say, God told me, because they're pursuing an agenda and all that. God is not going to tell me about you, Ibi. God is not going to tell me about you, Nnenna. God told me to tell you, Nnenna, that this is the man you're going to marry, blah, blah, blah. God doesn't operate that way. God will speak to me, about what he wants me to do. God spoke to Elijah, go to the brook of Cherith. I have instructed the raven to bring you food. God told him, go to Zarephath. I have instructed a widow there. Something Elijah needed. God addresses our needs, And when Elijah got to the widow, he didn't say, woman, God told me to tell you to cook food for me. No, that's manipulation. God spoke to Moses to go to Egypt to encounter Pharaoh. And along the line, God told him what to do. What do you have in your hand? He said, I've got a rod. He said, use it to touch the Red Sea. So God speaks, but he speaks for a reason. I don't want to go too far because I'm going to come to that. There is a purpose for every one of us. When God speaks, it will have to relate to that purpose. It's not going to just speak randomly.
Fantastic. The series is the Jesus Touch series. Now, Ziri, you've spoken extensively about God speaking and God spoke to you. So that was the process of your journey into great hope. But for the purpose of this series, I want now to talk about how Jesus and your life intersected. So Nnenna, so you went from, of course, the challenges of being homeless, and today you work with mental health patients, teaching them new skill sets and going back to work. At what point would Jesus and you intersect, or rather did the Jesus touch your life?
About a year and a half ago, I'd say it was. I was homeless in hospital and was meant to be discharged and couldn't be discharged because there was nowhere to discharge me to, because obviously I wasn't living anywhere. And I didn't have a very strong Christian background, remember that. But I remember thinking that there was nothing I could do.
Yeah.
And luckily, my aunt, she is very ardent Christian, and she sent me a link to join a morning prayer. It's popularly known as NSPPD. And I wondered what it was. I had no idea. I mean, it was like 6 a.m. in the morning. And I used to think, what could be so urgent that she would send me a YouTube link like at 6 a.m. in the morning every day? But eventually I had a look. And I was quite intrigued by the prayers and how powerful it was as well. And people were giving testimonies that they, that they had all kinds of issues, things they wanted, sickness, whatever it was. And Jesus came and God came and answered their prayers, and there was healing and so many wonderful things. I found the testimonies quite interesting and quite out of this world, really. So I thought, well, why not me pray for a place to live as well? Even if God can do for other people, why not me? So I remember writing it down. I need somewhere to live, I need a home. and I started to actively join the prayers every day. And in my own time as well, say lots of prayers all the time in my own simple way, however, because I do know I have my own relationship with Jesus and I pray the way I pray, but I just know it's been heard. So anyway, through that process, I started to feel I was getting closer to God, to understanding Jesus more. I started to read the Bible a bit more as well. And I suppose that was when the intersection happened, over that time. And then eventually I did get a place. My prayers were answered, So it was quite it was a good feeling. It was nice to know that, to look back at the time and see that for the year and a half that I had been struggling and suffering and all of that, I was being taken care of. That, I think, when you asked about what kept me going, I can't say that I kept myself going. It was God who was looking over me, keeping me going, and just taking care of me and protecting me, So yeah, it's been quite an interesting journey.
Wow. So Nnenna, first and foremost, I just want to issue a disclaimer that this program is not affiliated to any religious organization. And so Nnenna was just sharing her story and her experience about the particular religious organization that she talks about. So Nnenna, in your instance, straight off the block, you heard the Lord speaking to you that I've got you. Yes. Before you even went into that wilderness experience.
Exactly.
So you went through all of that, groping and going through all of that. And you kind of like felt that God was looking after you. But when your aunt gave you, sent you that link and you began to pray, you had some prayer points that God answered. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, yeah, pretty much. Yes, exactly, yes, yeah.
So that was the point when everything came full circle for you. So the Lord spoke to you at the beginning of the journey, and then just towards the end of the journey, you had to, pray. You prayed, and that. Listen, I'm not putting words into your mouth, but I just want to understand what you're saying, that you are very certain that it was the prayers that you prayed.
Definitely, yes.
That caused a change in your life.
Yes, definitely. There wasn't anything else, because I had moaned, I had cried, I had, complained, I had spoken to people, done everything, and nothing had worked. I'd written letters and all sorts. But it wasn't until I actually sat down and started praying that all the actions and activities behind the scenes were actually, moving and going somewhere, and there was a result at the end of it. Yeah. I hadn't actually thought of it, that in the beginning was when, because they do say that God knows everything from beginning to end. And I hadn't actually thought of it that at the beginning God had said he's got me, and I was going to go through so much. And I wasn't practicing Christianity at the time. If I had known, I would have been more. I would have been praying more from day one. They wouldn't have been so bad. But then, having said that, I think I needed the experience. I needed to go through that whole journey to understand that there is a God and how He works. Prayer does work.
And would you say that experience was necessary? That it was a predestinated or preordained thing that you had to go through to prepare you for the role that you had to play today in terms of teaching mental health patients new life skills, coming back to work?
Probably. It's something that's very new to me at the moment. I had never thought about working in mental health. What I do know is that there's a lot of stigma with mental health generally, and it's rather unfortunate. Even I have to fight it myself and not stigmatize my own self. And I do feel that I am able to give something back, because I've had the experience of suffering mental health quite badly, and I've seen a lot of it around me. And I don't care what anybody says. It can happen to anybody. It could be, I don't care what your life is like, how wonderful it may be or not, but it can just strike. And I think about mental health, it sneaks up on you. You could be surrounded by a good life, but then the depression sets in, the anxiety sets in, and you don't know until everything is just dark around you. And you just wonder, how did I get to this point? And sometimes you're not even in a position to actually think and see what's going on around you. It's a very dark place to be. So a lot of the time it's people outside who care, I hope, that would see the difference, see the struggle, see the difference, and understand that something isn't right. So if this is my calling now to work in mental health, I use it. I don't know yet, but I find it very rewarding what I'm doing now, because I see these patients and my heart goes out to them, and you have to think, what could have happened to you? What could have happened to them to be in these secure units? Because sometimes I work with prisoners as well, people who, because of their mental health, can't go into prison, so they're put into mental health units instead. So I work with such people as well. And I suppose it's also giving them a chance, because I had a chance. In fact, in all of this, I've been given a second chance as well. And these people I work with get to have a second chance to make something of their lives, to go back to work, to become upstanding members of society, and have the respect that go with it as well. So all is not lost. There is hope at the end.
Fantastic. Thank you very much for sharing that. And Ziri, and I would have to ask you that same question. So at what point did, of course, you said that, that you heard from God, which is, of course, an established fact. But then how did the Lord's life, or how did you and God's path intersect in a way that you could pinpoint to say that it was this that God did for me that turned my despair into great hope?
Okay. Well, that God is God, isn't it? So I would say that, I have to go back to my upbringing, how I'm very glad, and privileged for the kind of upbringing I had, in the sense that from childhood, through Sunday schools and all, I was brought into contact with God, from an early age. I'm not saying that, I've been sent all the way, or that I've never really messed up. I did messed up, many times, but at least that foundation was set for me. So sometimes I'll go away and then I'll come back, go away and I'll come back. But at the point in 2013, when what I call this other phase of my life journey, began, the foundation was quite, how am I going to put it? I did a lot of praying and fasting, I have to say. When you come between the, how do they say, the devil and the deep blue sea, then you remember to cry. So I fasted and I lost so much weight, I'm not going to lie. But that was the foundation being set. And that was also when my pruning, kind of began, in a sense. And also, a lot of things changed. Even my work with God, even my knowledge of God, became hugely transformed. This is more like now God revealing himself to me personally, as against me getting to know God, maybe just through, if you permit me to use the word, through the spectrum of religion. You see, in other words, the God that was presented to me, through my religious upbringing, sometimes it's not actually, the same as God that is. One thing that I came to realize during this part of my journey was that God's love is unconditional. I grew up believing that if you did wrong or if you sinned, then God's love for you diminishes. Then you shouldn't have any right. I mean, you shouldn't really come before him, you have to go and hide because punishment awaited you. But then when my eyes were opened, that God's love for me is such that there is nothing I can do or not do that would diminish his love for me. So it's unconditional. So with that love, that understanding of love, God as love, it transformed me completely in my relationship with God. I began then to trust him even the more. You see, and it was possible for me now to actually hold tight to him regardless of my physical state or whatever I may have done. And through that, God began to comfort himself the more to me. I used to say that then, when I take the Bible, sometimes I'll be directed to go and read the story in the Bible. I feel the need to go and read a story. Sometimes I've read the story of Joseph, Abraham, David, and in it, sometimes to this Elijah, the story I just cited, in need, God was unfolding himself to me. When it came to do with provision, for instance, I was sleeping, and then the story came to me about Elijah and the widow. So when I woke up in the morning, I went to go and study it. And in reading it, my eyes were now opened even further. I could feel that God was now speaking to me, that he does not provide just in a certain or in a specific way all the time. Because at this point, the story of him going to the brook had been established already. Okay. But now God was trying to let me know that I have other ways I can also do whatever it is I wanted to do. So all of these strengthened my faith in God. So it was like walking step by step. Sometimes God will reveal things to me in a dream. Then when I wake up, I'll go to explore that. You see, so it is as a result of this cooperation, and total dependence, on God, it helped me to carry on my journey. So all the time, I would say that touch had always been there. From this moment where I began to yield to him. So the touch had always been there. I've always felt his presence. The things I write, I used to say, yes, as I write, to inspire, because I am inspired to write. They come to me through inspiration. When I started writing, even up to now, when I write, I go back to read it, and it's almost as though someone else had written it. And I know it's someone else that has written it. It's the Spirit of God through me writing. So I can't lay credit to anything I've written. I learn from the things I have written, you see. So the touch has always been there, and that makes the difference. Another thing I could add to this is when God makes a promise.
Fantastic.
When God makes a promise and he fulfills it, it makes you realize, what? There is nothing God cannot do. So if God says, I used to say this often, if God says to jump, I will jump. Because I have come to prove God to be true and faithful. And he never fails. So yes,
fantastic.
Touch of God, I would say.
Fantastic. Now, in your poem, you talked about predestination. So, and I asked Nnenna that question before, so I'm going to ask it to you as well. Do you think that sometimes that the difficulties that we experience in life are supposed to be to bring us to the purpose for which he has created us?
Yes, the simple answer to that is yes. Capital yes, Y-E-S, Yes, God. You see, the poem I wrote, the scripture I used, the scriptural reference, it says, for all the time of my waiting, my appointed time, I will wait, right? There is an appointed time for everything that happens. And one other place, Psalm 66:10, 66:10? No. Somewhere is Job. He says that thou performest the things that are appointed unto me. God performed the things that are appointed unto me. That's why in that poem I use the keywords there were plan, purpose, and an appointed time. Things that are appointed unto me. God appoints, God formed us in the womb. He said it in Jeremiah 1:5, and he chooses our path for us. You see, and along that path are the things that we need to encounter as a matter of necessity so that we can be transformed into the being who alone can fulfill those things that we're created to do. If I hadn't gone through this experience from 2012, I would say, or 13 actually downwards, and I relied on my previous experience up until 2012, I was a non-entity. If you got it, putting it simply. I just made a quotation now. You said you wanted to write it down. I'm not sure I would have come up with such quotations. I was empty. I was full of just academic knowledge. You understand? I could maybe discuss accounting, banking, and economics and all that with you, but the deeper reflections, started coming from my own experience. There's a general saying that hardship, right, brings out the philosopher in us.
Yes.
So when you go through difficult situations, you become a great thinker. Life begins to, because then you begin to actually begin to see the lessons that life has for us. So yes, I do believe that some things we have to go through in life are preordained, like you said, in the case of Joseph. Okay, if Joseph didn't go through those experiences, how on earth would he, living in Canaan, been appointed a prime minister in Egypt? How could that happen? A good example is Moses as well. Moses was he was more or less a prince. He was adopted as a child, as a prince. So he had the princely training, but that was not enough. When he now went into the wilderness, he said he became a shepherd, looking after animals that don't necessarily obey instructions. And if you're a hot-tempered person, as he was at the time, you will kill all the flock, all your flock, because you tell them to move to the right, they move to the left. You get angry, you take the stock, you kill them. But this is the point. When he now began to lead the Israelites, you could see that the greater skill he needed was those of a shepherd. He needed to be extremely patient with these people. If he had just come fresh from the royal palace and training, he would have struggled, but then he needed that other experience, which is oftentimes, it comes as a form of humiliation. If you permit me, I'll give you another example, historical example, Nelson Mandela. Okay.
Oh, yeah. Tell me about those things. Tell us about, you said you had some extraordinary, God did some extraordinary things for you. So maybe you should just quickly also add that to the conversation as well.
Okay, you're putting me on the spot now. A lot of them had to do with provisions, being that I wasn't doing any secular job at the time. Oh man, it was not easy. That I didn't find myself on the street. It can only be the hand of God. Oftentimes, God would reveal himself in ways I never would have imagined. Divine encounters, I meet people who, are strangers. And then I realized that with time, they had to play a vital role in supporting me. And I could reel out a whole lot of names, but of course, that would be necessary. But it's someone I met by chance. You understand? And before you know it, I see that God is not using that person to either support. Sometimes I've been provided with accommodation from people I just met randomly, so to speak, randomly. So I have seen God move in certain ways.
Yeah.
I was going to give that example of sometimes, it's through humiliation that, we get, truly refined. And that instance had to do with Nelson Mandela. Before his incarceration, he had a different approach to life, but then he was humiliated. He was in prison for how many years? 27 years. And he got broken. He got transformed, he got refined, so that I wrote in my book, Life a Mystery Solved, that the Mandela who came out of prison was not the same one who went in, because by the time he came out, everybody loves Mandela. He's a role model, so to speak, and he preached, more or less, practiced also reconciliation and forgiveness, which the Mandela before prison or imprisonment would have acted in that way, but he was humiliated. He was wearing rags, prison rags. He was hewing a stone and breaking it. This is a lawyer, this is someone who had a profile, When he became the president of South Africa, he traveled around, he met with the Queen, he did all of that stuff. The point I'm trying to make is that our experiences, right, we shouldn't despise them. It doesn't matter. We can never be, there's this thing that people use, this example that they give, they get maybe a $5 and £5 note, and then they squeeze it, they throw it into water, they do whatever. It is still £5, you see. So our experience, some people are so scared, we're so self-conscious. I used to be very, very self-conscious back in the days. I had to protect my dignity. Oh, wow. But after God dealt with me, I became more relaxed. I'm not I'm not ashamed of anything at all. I can bend, I can do whatever I have to do, because I realize that my true worth is not necessarily in how, I am packaged. It is what is inside of me, you see. And oftentimes God will use, as he says, the foolish things of this world to confound the wise. So our experiences, is what I'm trying to say, is that they are just there to help us become whom we are supposed to be. And it cannot take away from us in any way. Whatever height we have to get to, it doesn't matter how low our experiences take us, we'll still get there, and it doesn't matter. That's the case with Mandela. And of course, in my own case as well, because everything I knew, my career, everything I had to abandon it and more or less start from the scratch.
Ziri, you know what, right? I didn't want to do this, but when I hear yourself and Nnenna speak, I remember my own wilderness experiences. And, I just thank God and say, Lord, you know what? Thank you so much for those experiences. Because I learned from those experiences that appointments are not the end.
Yeah.
But they are a bend that extends your capacity to believe. And that sometimes when you go through difficult times, not only does it prune and purge you, it also causes you to grow character.
Absolutely.
Because, like you come into a situation where sometimes you experience a lot of emotional and mental assault. And what I mean by that is that you would see people go through so many things, squalor, all sorts of things, people suffering and all of that. And if I didn't go through what I went through, I probably would have, oh, what's all this, But when I went through what I went through, it made me to empathize with people. It wasn't as if I wasn't empathetic before, but I think that it was necessary for me to go through those things to make me a better person. So I think that sometimes that those situations have their place in life. And again, I always say, use your story. Don't hide your story.
Sure.
Don't hide it. People that are coming behind you. And that's the reason why I started Ibi Speaks, or I started my blog, because I say that our stories are content enough to share, that our stories are streetlights and also are the survival kits that people who are coming behind us would need as they journey in the same road that we have journeyed. So based on that, what would you say to somebody, Nnenna? What would you say to someone who is going through a tough time, difficulties and all of that? Mind you also went through it for them for a time like this.
I would say simply not to give up. It's what lasts. It's just for a season. It'll pass, and to well, if they believe in God, to really use that and let it be their backbone to help them, because sometimes I remember when while I was living in temporary accommodation, I had just discovered Christianity, if you like. And every now and again I would pray and I would get the strength then to continue. So it wasn't all the time, but it was there, it kept me going. So I would say not to give up, basically, just simple as that. Yeah. Just keep going, keep praying, and trust and believe.
And Ziri, what would be your word for anyone who is going through?
Yeah, in addition to what Nnenna said, I would say, know your why and know why. When you know the reason behind your struggles, it helps you to hold on. When you know that these struggling or these challenges are meant to well, you could say catapult, but normally it's not as fast as that. It's meant to transport you from where you are to where you ought to be. You keep going. If you know where you're going, if you have a destination in mind, I say, it is difficult to be dissuaded no matter how bad the journey becomes. If you're setting off from a point A to a point B, and you really want to get to that point B, you may come across difficult terrains. You may come across roads that are almost impassable. The rain may fall, there might be something falling on the road, maybe a tree has fallen, whatever. If you have it in mind, if you're determined to get to that other place, nothing can stop you. So know your why and know why. Why is this? Your why is the reason for your existence, which is why everything that we go through because of the purpose behind existence. I can say clearly and confidently that I have a better understanding or even definition of who I am and my purpose. And that is what has kept me going. So it doesn't matter what I see. I have an end in sight. God has given me at least partly a vision where I'm going. So let's assume that today I don't have much, right? But I know what I see is the picture that God has shown me. And it is a glorious picture, you see. So it doesn't matter what I see here. According to the Bible, it says that those guys, Abraham and co, they had their eyes on that heavenly vision, isn't it? So but here on this earth as well, when you know your why, then you would also uncover why these things are, and it would keep you going no matter what. So in addition to what Nnenna said, don't give up, pray and all that, know why you have to go through this. If you have a reason, it becomes easier. I go running, like I said, I have a reason for running. And so whether it is snowing, I go and run. If it is raining, I go and run. If I feel like I want to sleep on, I go and run. Why? Because I have a reason. If I was just dabbling to just run because others are running, the first snow, oh man, I'm just going to sleep because I have no reason. When we know why, when we know why we have to go through the things we have to go through, it is difficult to stop us. When we have, a vision and we're determined to get to that end, it doesn't matter what we encounter. I think you can testify to this. I mean, Nnenna and Ibi, if you're traveling from a place to another place, you're driving, for instance, but you need to get to that other destination. There's no amount of roadblock or whatever that will make you turn back and go home. Am I correct? You will still find a way. You may have to change your route. You may do whatever is necessary. If your car breaks down, you may even park it and hike or get a public transportation because you want to get to that other end. You want to get to your destination. But when that is missing, then it becomes easy to drop out. So in addition to what Nnenna said, know your why, have a reason, then that would strengthen your determination and resolve to get to the end.
Ziri, I just want to ask this question for the benefit of those who are not believers, who do not have an experience with Jesus Christ of God. Generally speaking in life, how would go through tough times?
I have to say this, and I have to say this emphatically. Without God, there is no life. Why? Our life, we didn't create ourselves. Our life is an intention by God. Before I formed thee in the womb, I knew thee, and then I anointed you. So there is identity, there is purpose. The purpose we are here for is not ours. I didn't choose my purpose. You didn't choose yours. Then I didn't choose hers. God brought us here for a purpose. So it will be unnecessary trying to accomplish that. Number one, you can't even discover that purpose without God, and then trying to accomplish it without God. What is the point? It's like I would say, in the Christian parlance, you're running a race to heaven. Okay, so you just run the race, but in the end, you're not going into heaven. What's the point of running the race? You understand?
Now, Ziri, I want to ask you this question because our time is fast spent, and well, it's a controversial question, but I'll still ask it. So there's so many non-believers that are billionaires and inventors of all sorts of things. So how do we do that? What do you have to say about that?
Yeah, and then it's a very good question. I like that. The thing is, what is the purpose of life? To acquire much wealth? To acquire much material property? If that is the purpose of life, we have failed because we came into the world empty-handed, right? And then we go back empty-handed. So what's the point?
But let me say this. Some of them, like the Apple, the mobile phones, the Apple brands, Microsoft, of cars and all those kind of things. People invented those things, and those things are useful.
This is what I wrote in Life a Mystery Solved. You see, the problem with some religious folks is that, like I said just a while ago, they keep their eyes on heaven, but then they forget that God, I used to say this, I said, God did not create us, brought us into this world so that we can run a race to heaven. What's the point? Just give back to us in heaven, or create us and put us in heaven. God has a purpose for us, but do we have the time to want to uncover it? I asked a similar question in a Bible study, which was, why is it that, quote and unquote, unbelievers, sinners prosper materially, and then the righteous, quote and unquote, believers, they don't? And then it dawned on me, I asked the question and I asked it, for a reason, and I answered it. God has set principles in the world. So if you did what Elon Musk has done, you'll be prospered. He says God giveth us the power to make wealth. God is going to prosper what is in your hands. But if you have nothing in your hands, then what is God going to prosper? It's good to get it. Yeah, it's good to get a job. But you see, the problem is we become so job dependent, such that we rely on salaries and to be paid. But these people, I used to give the instance of Bill Gates, right? He dropped out of school and started working on his whatever in the garage somewhere. How many people have that vision and will pursue it, and will live, acquiring a certificate because they have a vision and then they're pursuing it? The thing again is lack of vision. When you don't have the right vision, you have nothing to fight for, you have nothing to struggle for. So somehow, I don't want to be too controversial, because I was going to say that again, by being religious, wrongly religious, it kind of blinds us to the realities of life, you see. And I cite examples in the Bible. Joseph was, I'm not political. I wouldn't even go for any political whatever, except I'm appointed, but I won't go and fight for any political office. But Joseph occupied a high political office. So also Daniel. Moses was a leader, a political leader. We could name that Abraham was a very wealthy businessman. Job was very wealthy, and all of that. But what is the difference with these people? These people somehow walked in line with their purpose.
Fantastic.
They walked in line with their purpose. Abraham wasn't just bowing down 10 times a day, was praying to God. Joseph wasn't just in prison there praying to God to deliver him from prison. When he was in Potiphar's house, he wasn't just there praying, God, I want to be freed as a slave. He worked diligently, and God prospered the works of his hand. He did what he was called to do. He interpreted a dream, and through that was recommended to Pharaoh, and then the rest is history.
Ziri, I'm afraid I have to stop us here, but from that you have to discover your purpose, and that life is about discovering your purpose, and that when we discover our purpose, then we are working in line with God, what God has called us to do. Because whether you're a believer or a non-believer, there are principles in life that you have to follow. Elon Musk, whatever he is,
Musk,
a prosperous businessman. And so for you to be able to prosper, you have to do what he does. However, Jesus says, what does it profit a man to gain the whole world and to lose his soul? Therefore, life in all its forms and ramification stems from Jesus. And Jesus is the true life. That's the bottom line of it, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Fantastic. So Nnenna and Ziri, I just want to say thank you so much for being on Ibi Speaks today. I absolutely enjoyed that conversation. The network was funny. I think this is the first time I'm having such a problem, but it's okay. But then I would say that I really, really enjoyed the conversation with you. I really thank you for your forthrightness and for your openness and for your vulnerability. And I believe that someone had learned a lot from you today. And so guys, also thank you very much, everybody. And yeah, if you have subscribed to my YouTube channel, please subscribe. And I will be back next time for a brand new series. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
So guys, I'm going to call you.